It's an honor for us to host Major Jeff Strueker. The Mogadishu, Somalia invasion and taking out the number 2 and number 3 man was not the only mission that he was involved in. He was served for 21 years, a veteran, and he was in the Panama arena with that conflict, and then I believe Afghanistan as well. And so he's a veteran of many years, then served as a chaplain, has an incredible testimony. He's a man of faith, pastors a church now just south of Atlanta, Georgia, and he done a phenomenal job. I came across him the first time giving his testimony at Liberty University, and was impacted by his testimony, and then we invited him. He spoke last night at Fairview Baptist in Edmond, and then yesterday afternoon at Oak Pack in Oklahoma City. And it's an honor, a real honor for us to have Major Jeff Strueker with us here tonight. Let's give him a Tulsa welcome as he comes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Please continue to enjoy your meal. I am honored to be with you. I had a great time for the last couple of days in Oklahoma City. As you heard, I just spoke to OPEC, and it was an awesome opportunity just to have lunch with those folks. Some of them are here tonight. But Jesse said, Jeff, you did okay, but can you be a little bit more Pentecostal with us tonight? And so, Jesse, I think what I'll just do is speak in a private language, if that's okay. I'll just talk in military acronyms, but I'm going to need a Marine to translate, if that's all right. So can you help me out right there? Okay, let me hear you say "Oorah" if you can help me out. All right, thank you. I'll tell you a little bit about my story, but really what I'm here to do is to challenge you. And the challenge I'll just place before you right up front, and then I want to come back to this at the end. Please, city elders, don't give up the city. Now let me explain what I mean by that. When I was 18 years old, I was in high school, no idea what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And on a whim, because I had no military background in my family, on a whim, I went to talk to an Army recruiter. And I showed up at a senior in high school and just simply asked a question. I said, what's the toughest job in the Army? And there was 2 recruiters in the office that day. It's just me. In fact, I think I was skipping school just to go talk to the recruiters. And there was an argument when I asked the toughest job. One of the guys across the room said, Jeff, the toughest job is Special Forces. This was a guy on the other side of the room. He said, it's the Army's Green Berets. I don't know anything about the military. So the guy that I was talking to, this Army recruiter said, he doesn't know what he's talking about, Jeff. He's probably never done anything hard in his life. The toughest job in the Army, hands down, is the Airborne Rangers. And not knowing the difference between Special Forces and Airborne Rangers, I asked this recruiter, well, what do they do? And he said, you obviously have no idea what you're talking about, so let me explain it to you this way. Let's say that I take both units to the Gateway Arch in St. Louis, Missouri. Let's say that we take a Special Forces Alpha team, about 12 men, to the base of the Gateway Arch. And then I take a squad of Army Rangers, about 10 men, to the bottom of the Gateway Arch, and tell them both to get to the top of the arch. I'll tell you what Rangers will do, Jeff. They'll do in St. Louis, Missouri, exactly what they did on the cliffs of Pointe du Hoc, Normandy, France, June 6, 1944. They'll throw grappling hooks and knotted hand lines over that Gateway Arch, and they will just climb hand over hand all the way to the top. Special Forces guys on the other side will just go inside and hit the top floor on the elevator button. And then this recruiter said, very seriously, Jeff, you don't have any idea what you're asking for. And I don't want you to get in over your head. So before you go any further, I want you to go home and I want you to watch a documentary. Now, this documentary wasn't made by the Army. It was actually an expose on Ranger School done by 2020. And in this documentary, it showed some of the strongest, some of the toughest warriors in the planet from all branches of the military. They'd come to Fort Benning, Georgia, and they would attempt Ranger training, and most of them wouldn't make it through the first week. And in the first couple of minutes of this documentary, I was hooked. I brought the documentary back the next day, skipped school twice in a row, and handed it back to the recruiter and said, sign me up. I want to become an Army Ranger. Now, he sent me, basically took care of the contract. As soon as I graduated from high school, I left for Fort Benning, Georgia. I went through infantry training. I went through the Army's airborne course, and then I started to serve in this special operations unit, the 75th Ranger Regiment. I showed up there as a private, 18 years old, and left there 10 years later as a sergeant first class. The men that I served with in the Ranger Regiment are hands down some of the most incredible warriors I've ever seen. And I will tell you that I am the man that's standing before you today because of the guys that I had the privilege to serve next to. They forged this man into me. Now, when I joined the Army, the reason why I asked this recruiter, what's the toughest job, is because I had a desire to go to combat, and I'm not exaggerating, I wanted to get shot at. And here's where this comes from. You see, when I was a kid growing up, I didn't come from a church family. And my parents didn't know anything about Jesus. They never taught me about Jesus. And so when I was a young kid, I had this overwhelming, paralyzing fear of death. And this went back for me as far as I can remember. So I used to wake my family up in the middle of the night with this gnawing in my stomach, not knowing what happens to you after you die. I know I'm going to die, but I don't know what happens next. And this went on for me for a long time, until I turned 13 years old. Because at 13, my next door neighbors came by to talk to me. This young married couple who treated me like a little brother, cared enough about me to come to my house when I was 13 years old. They knocked on my door and they said, Jeff, can we come in and can we talk? Because we got something really important we need to talk to you about. And for the first time in my life, somebody described Jesus to me. They told me about sin. They described for me what happened 2,000 years ago on a cross. And then they looked me in the eyes and they said, Jeff, if you will surrender your soul to the Lord Jesus Christ, He will radically, totally change you. It's called the abundant life. And it starts right now, today, if you will turn it all over to Jesus Christ. And then this couple said next, and they didn't know me well enough to know how serious this was for me. They said, he won't only give you abundant life, He'll give you eternal life. And you don't have to worry about what happens to you next. And that night, 13 years old, I don't even remember the words that I said, but I'm laying in my bed and I'm thinking about what they just told me, and it all started to make sense. And I got out of my bed and I knelt down and I just simply said, God, I'm a sinner. And I don't want to live with this fear. God, will you forgive me? God, will you change me? And folks, when I woke up the next morning, something was different. Yeah, you can clap. Now, I'm saying something was so different that when I got off the bus from school the next day, I didn't go to my house. I went next door to my neighbors. I knocked on their door and I said, I did what you guys talked about last night, and there's something different inside of me. So when I go to this Army recruiter's office, I'm trying to find out, am I really over this fear of dying? Is it really settled for me? And I wanted to go to a special operations unit. I wanted to go to war because I wanted to know, am I really over this terrible fear of death? So I'm a sergeant in the Army's Ranger Regiment, been in the Army for a couple of years, and the United States is getting ready to invade the Republic of Panama. I got notified a couple of days before this invasion was going to go down because on the night of December 20th, 1989, when Operation Just Cause began, we were going to start the invasion with 2 parachute assaults onto airfields in Mogadishu, Somalia. My unit would seize the Rio Hato and Torrijos Tocumen airfields. We would grab those airfields and then fly in the rest of the invasion force. We put hundreds of aircraft in the skies on the night of the invasion. And there was a high probability that some of those aircraft might get shot down. So I loaded up in secrecy and flew down to Panama about 24 hours before the invasion began. My job was to provide a search and rescue force for the first night of the operation. After that first night went down, the Rangers were there to first defeat Panamanian army. But secondly, our job was to find the country's leader, Manuel Noriega. We were there to capture him and to send him back to the United States to stand trial. Now, I was in a couple of firefights in the invasion of Panama. I got into a firefight while I was in a helicopter that had to make an emergency landing. But I never really went through one of those life or death, tonight's it, I'm not going to see tomorrow morning experiences in Panama. In fact, really what Panama taught me, and it's a lesson all of us need to remember from time to time. Panama reminded me that life is short because some of my buddies who were 19 or 20 years old got killed on that first night. And most of us, I did this, chances are you do this too. Most of us live our lives like we're going to have lots of time in the future to take care of stuff. Am I right? And what Panama reminded me is, you don't have any promises. God didn't make any promises to me, and He did not promise you tomorrow either. And the one thing that I had been dragging my feet on, the one thing that I had been waiting to do, and I knew it was time to stop waiting, was to propose to my high school sweetheart. So the first chance I got, right after I got back from Panama, I bought a ring, and I flew home, and I asked Dawn to be my wife. Now, we set a date to get married about a year later, and if you know your history, you know that a year later, the U.S. is involved in Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm. I'm in Fort Benning, Georgia. She's back in our hometown. We're just a couple of weeks away from our wedding day. You know what that means, guys. She's taken care of all of the wedding details. We're almost ready to get married. And I'm in a special operations unit, which means everything that we do is secret. And I convinced my commander to let me make a phone call to my fiance. And the phone call basically goes like this. Dawn, I can't tell you when I'm leaving. I'm not authorized to tell you where I'm going, and I don't know when I'm going to get back. But I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be in the country on our wedding day. Yeah. There's a long pause on the phone, and she said, Jeff, if you are going off to war again, we need to get married right away. I'm talking to her over an unclassified phone line. So I said, I didn't say the word war. I just said, I'm not going to be in the country on our wedding day. And I'm going to quote her verbatim now. She said, don't play games with me, Jeff. If you get killed, I want the flag. Then she said, hey, buddy, you need to fly home and we need to get married right away. And basically, she just foregone the entire white wedding that she dreamed about. I got home at about noon that weekend, and 2 hours later, we're walking down the aisle of our family church getting married. I get back on an airplane, fly back to Fort Benning, Georgia, and then eventually over to Kuwait as part of Desert Storm. I got shot at in Kuwait too, but it was nothing like Mogadishu, Somalia. So now let me tell you just a quick story, and I realize this isn't normal dinner conversation, but let me just tell you a quick story from Black Hawk Down because I think it will encourage you. When I When I got to Somalia, I was a 24-year-old squad leader. I had 10 men that I was responsible for. And as you heard, it was my job to lead the Humvees in and out of the city streets while I was in that country. We got sent over to Somalia as part of this joint special operations task force. We were really supposed to do something that's secret, but the news caught a hold of it. And what the news was reporting is that this country on the Horn of Africa was descending into chaos. And that's because there's no government, there's no police force, and there was nothing stopping guys from guns from doing anything they wanted to do. Which I hope you just heard what I just said. All of those morons out there that are claiming we should defund the police, I can tell you what that looks like. I can show you in Mogadishu, Somalia, what that looks like. The United States originally showed up in Somalia to help people that were dying from starvation. Hundreds of thousands of them already dead. You probably remember the Marines landing on the beach in December of 1992 and opening up supply lines and handing out beans and rice to people just to keep them alive for one more day. The United States goes over there with the United Nations and we're trying to help. We're just trying to make things better and keep people alive. And this country has no military, and so these warlords, think about them like gang leaders in our country today. They start to fight each other, trying to become the most powerful guy. Where there's a vacuum, there will always be somebody showing up who will do something evil to try to take over. So, eventually, these warlords get into kind of a 7-way civil war. And most of those warlords didn't mind the United States being there, but one of those warlords started to target United Nations workers. And then he started to blow up U.S. supply convoys. He wasn't just using guns and drugs, though he was very good at the guns and drugs. He started to use food to control his own people. He started to decide, I will take the food and I will starve my neighbors into submission. And that warlord, in the summer of 1993, his name was Mohammed Farah Aidid. He ambushed and murdered 24 United Nations workers while they were handing out food. Confiscated the food. And the UN Security Council met together and they said, hey, we have to do something about Aidid. We have to bring this man to justice. So the United States responded with Task Force Ranger. It was a company of Rangers from Fort Benning, Georgia, my unit. It was a helicopter unit from Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and some special operations soldiers from all branches of the military up and down the east coast of the United States. We went over to Somalia not to hand out food. Our goal was to kill or to capture Aidid and take down all of the leadership of his clan. We do about 7 missions in Mogadishu, and we're starting to take down most of the leadership of his Haber Getter clan. But by 12 weeks into this thing, we still haven't got Aidid, and we still haven't taken down a couple of the top-ranking guys. And now we're getting a lot of pressure from the Clinton administration to wrap this up and to get out of Somalia, because he's getting a lot of pressure from the news. They started to call it another Vietnam. So my big boss on October 3rd, 1993, Major General William Garrison, the commander of all of us, decides to go launch a mission to get 2 bad guys. 2 really high-ranking bad guys show up in the same building at the same time. This hasn't happened the whole time we've been there. The problem is, it's in the middle of the part of town controlled by Aidid. It is in the broad daylight, and there is nobody, once you get in there, to bail you out. And our big boss decides to go ahead and launch a mission to get these guys. So special operators load up on Little Bird helicopters and fly in. They assault the target building. As they're doing that, other Rangers from my unit fly in on Blackhawks and slide down ropes. And while all of that is going on, I lead a column of about 12 Humvees through the city streets, and we wait about a half a block away. Now, the plan was that when the special operators get done inside the target building, we'll grab the bad guys and we'll throw them on the Humvees. Everybody who flew in by helicopter will jump on the Humvees, and we're going to try to be out of there in less than 30 minutes because we just walked into his front door to get these guys. And almost for 30 minutes, this thing went like we thought it was going to go until the Rangers started to slide down the ropes. You see, just like the movie Black Hawk Down shows, one of the Rangers named Todd Blackburn, when he left the helicopter to grab the rope, he fell about 70 feet and he landed headfirst. So when I got to the target building, my commander, Colonel Danny McKnight, was calling me on the radio saying, "Jeff, we got a seriously wounded Ranger. We need you to put him on your Humvee, and I need you to drive him back to the base. It doesn't look good for him." Now, when I got to Blackburn, he was already unconscious. He had some medics working on him, trying to keep him alive. And I split my guys in half, and we put Blackburn on a Humvee, and we split the rest of us on a couple of other Humvees, and we started to make our way back to the base to try to get Todd Blackburn back to our surgeon. We wanted to get him some immediate medical help. Now, as we were making our way back to the base, I'm already getting shot at in Somalia. I've been getting shot at almost every day, literally every day, like clockwork, getting rocketed or shot at on every mission. But this mission was different. You see, when I drove those Humvees out of the city streets, and we were driving really slowly, trying not to do any further harm to Blackburn in the back of those Humvees, we turned a corner onto a road about the size of a gravel road in rural Oklahoma. And then I got hit from every direction imaginable. Now, y'all, I'm talking about rooftops and alleyways, doorways, and windows. This is point blank range, rocket propelled grenades going across both sides of the street. They're just lobbing hand grenades at us, automatic gunfire from everywhere. And I got a guy on a Browning 50 caliber machine gun who's holding the trigger down and spraying bullets all over the place, trying to return fire to all of these people. And he wasn't being very effective. So I told him to take his machine gun, turn to the left side of the Humvee, pick up all the bad guys on the left. Another guy with a machine gun sitting right behind me named Dominic Pilla. I told Pilla to take his machine gun, face the right, pick up all the bad guys on the right. I'll take care of everybody in front of the Humvee. Another guy in the back seat will take care of everybody behind us. And you warriors in this room know what I'm talking about now. This is now just a fight for our lives, just to make it back to the base. Down on the right side of the road, hiding, waiting for us, was a Somali gunman. When we got next to him, he was probably 10 feet away from us. And he saw Dominic Pilla at the same time that Pilla saw him. And these two guys shot and killed each other at the exact same instant. Dominic Pilla is the first guy from my unit, first guy from our entire operation killed in action over there. And when Dominic Pilla dies, this becomes a fight just to make it back to the base. I don't have enough time to tell you tonight about all that it took just to get back to the base. But when I get back there, the scene is chaos. It's a lot like you see in the movie Black Hawk Down. You see, the medics are rushing to my Humvee to pull Dominic Pilla's dead body off of the back. And the surgeon is trying to get to Todd Blackburn, just trying to keep him alive. And people are scrambling everywhere. And my platoon leader, Lieutenant Larry Morris, walks up to me. Now, I couldn't even imagine why we survived the firefight to get out of the city streets. I'm leaning over the hood of this Humvee thinking, God, I can't believe that I came through that alive. How did any of us just drive through that alive? And then my lieutenant walks up to me and he says, "Hey, Jeff, a second Black Hawk helicopter just got shot down." Now, I didn't know the first Black Hawk went down. He said, "We've already put the rest of the forces at the first crash site where Cliff Wolcott's helicopter crashed. Now Mike Durant's helicopter has gone down and we don't have anybody else who can go back out there. So Jeff, I need you to get your men, get on the back of that Humvee, and I need you to go back out there and see if there's anybody alive at the Durant crash site." You know, when he said that to me, one of those special operators came up to me and he said, "Hey, Sergeant, you should probably clean the back of that Humvee up. That's a mess back there. And if you leave your men sitting in all of that blood, it's going to mess them up for the rest of their lives." So I sent this one Humvee off to the side to go clean it up, used buckets and my bare hands. And I put all the rest of my guys on the vehicles, go get some more fuel, go get some more ammunition. We're getting ready to roll back out into the city streets. And I'm, with my bare hands, cleaning up the back of the Humvee, and I am terrified about dying. First time since I was 13 years old. I'm thinking, there's no way that I'm going to make it through these city streets tonight. This is a suicide mission. And I've already lost one of my men. And if I drive the rest of my guys back out in those city streets, every one of us are going to be in body bags tomorrow morning. And on top of this, Dawn and I had been married for a couple of years. We've been trying to have a baby the whole time. And I get a letter in the mail just a couple of weeks into Somalia saying she's pregnant with our first child. And I'm thinking, I'm never going to see my wife again, and my child will never know who their father is. And all that's inside of me, every fiber of my being was saying, don't do this. Don't go back out there. But I need you to know something about Army Rangers. You see, these guys get up every day, and they do this to this day. They pledge their lives to one another, literally. They do it in what's called the Ranger Creed. And one of the things that the Ranger Creed says, when they're swearing this oath to one another every day, one of the things the Ranger Creed says is that I will never leave a fallen comrade to fall into the hands of the enemy. And I'm standing at the back of that Humvee and I start to think, either I go back out into those city streets and I know I'm going to die, or if I don't go back out into those city streets, I know Mike Durant is going to die. So this is not a good option. And everything inside of me is saying, don't do this. But as a Ranger, this is what my country is asking of me next. And if tonight is the night that I'm going to die, then so be it. And at that moment, I started to ask God for help. And I don't mean argue or negotiate with him. There was no negotiating going on. It was just, God, I'm in big trouble and I need your help right now. You know what that feels like when you're in over your head? At the back of that Humvee, I started to think about the difference that my Christian faith makes. And if you claim the name of Jesus Christ as your King in this room, I need you to hear what I'm going to say next. Because I'm at the back of that Humvee and I start to think, there's really only one of two ways this thing can go. Maybe God chooses to spare my life. There's no promises. Maybe he doesn't. But maybe he decides to spare my life tonight. Maybe I get to make it back home to my family. But maybe he doesn't. Maybe tonight is the night that I stand before him in heaven. But I do know this, because of what Jesus Christ did for me. Before my body hits the ground, my soul will be with my Father in heaven. Come on, y'all. Hear me, Christian, because I'm standing at the back of that Humvee and I start to think, go home to my family in Georgia, go home to my Father in heaven. It doesn't matter what happens next because I can't lose. And man, for me, that was like a switch just got flipped. You see, that was the moment that I was 100% convinced. I know I'm going to die in the next few moments, but I've got nothing to fear. And the rest of that night, I didn't go once, I went back and forth more, over and over again, all night long, till 9 o'clock the next morning, rolling back out into the city streets, getting shot at with absolutely no fear whatsoever. In fact, the next day after the battle is over with, I have my buddies coming up to me, and they're saying, Jeff, I listened to you last night over the radio, I heard your voice, and then I heard everybody else. And when everybody else is totally terrified, you're completely calm. How is that even possible? They said, man, I was watching you on the city streets and you're walking around like you're not even afraid. I don't understand how you could do that. My friends looked me in the eyes and they said, you've got something that I don't have and I want it. How can I get what you've got? I loved being an airborne ranger. All I wanted to do for the rest of my life is kick in doors and kill America's enemies. But I can take you to the exact spot on an airfield in Mogadishu, Somalia, the day after the battle was over with, where God made it abundantly clear to me, Jeff, I want you to do something more important. I want you to reach men at the soul level, and I want you to change their eternities. Which set me on a path to become an Army chaplain and spend the last 10 years of my Army career serving with the very same Rangers that I went with in Somalia. Listen to this. I went to Afghanistan 9 times and Iraq 5 times in those last 10 years. And I could look warriors in the eyes and say, I know what you're going through. I've been there myself. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, it's different when Jesus is the center of your world. And God gave me the privilege of having the chance to talk to a lot of America's warriors from all branches of the military about my faith in Jesus Christ. And I'm really here standing before you today because this Sunday we're going to celebrate our independence. It's not a birthday party for America. No, God gave you a precious gift that came at an incredibly high cost. You see, the gift of freedom is not free. It was paid for in blood. If you are an American citizen, you are living in the freest society in human history. We're not perfect, not even close to perfect, but nobody has ever experienced freedom like you have. And it came with a lot of blood. And that kind of freedom is important, but if you're a Christian, you have real, true freedom. You have a deeper freedom. You have what Jesus describes in John chapter 8 as free indeed. You see, when the Son sets you free, and only when the Son sets you free, then this 13-year-old boy who is terrified about dying can be free from the fear of death. And I'm really standing before you to say, if you don't even have to fear death, then what can life throw at you tomorrow? Now, I'm serious. Let's just talk the 23rd Psalm for a minute. If you can walk through the valley of the shadow of death and fear no evil, then you got nothing to worry about. And here's why. Because He will be with you in the valley. He says, I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. I've got you in the palm of my hand, and no one and nothing can snatch it out. So when you go to a doctor's office and waiting to hear the test results, you got nothing to fear. Man, when you start to crunch the numbers and you start to wonder, are we going to be able to make payroll next month? You got nothing to fear. Because there is one with you in the fire who is stronger than the circumstances of life. He's got you in the palm of His hand, and maybe He chooses to spare you in the midst of a storm. Maybe He doesn't. But you should be able to say, like the Apostle Paul, to live is Christ, and to die is gain. So I got nothing to worry about. And Christians, I want to challenge you. Will you live in such a way that no one and nothing causes you to fear? Because if you'll live like that, I tell you, your neighbors, your coworkers, your children and grandchildren are going to say, you got something that I don't have, and I want it. But my original challenge to you is this. I'm speaking to you as a warrior concerned about our national security. No country on earth will ever take away your freedom, America. No one could pull that off. But if you're not careful, you'll give it away. And I'm begging you, don't give away the city. I want to close with these words from Ezekiel 33. I called you, O son of man, and I made you a watchman on the wall. And there's an army approaching. And the people in the city don't know that an army is approaching. And it's your job, city elders, to stand up and to blow the horn and to alert the city that there's an army approaching. And if you don't do that, I will hold their blood on your hands. Now, if you blow the horn and they don't listen, their blood is on their hands. So I'm begging you, city elders, I'm proud of you for who you are. I'm proud of you for what you stand for. Please blow the horn and alert the city that there is an enemy on the prowl who seeks to devour who he may. And sometimes he will use wicked men to accomplish that. So blow the horn and alert the city that there is an enemy approaching. And then what happens next is on their hands, not yours. Thank you, city elders, for standing on the wall and for watching and holding guard for the city. God bless you.
Above the fruited